The Shameless Picture Show is part of the Cinepunks Network. If you like The Shameless Picture Show and you want to hear other great shows like it, make sure you check out the Cinepunks Network. You can find them at www.cinepunks.com. That's CINEPUNX. There's other great shows such as Cinepunks. There's The Carnage Report, Cinema Smorgasbord, Fat Girl Hacks, Loud, Fast, Philly, Tomb of Ideas, and Twitch of the Death Nerve, and so much more. If you like punk rock and you like movies, make sure to go to www.cinepunks.com. And let's not forget the sponsors for the Cinepunks Network. We have the Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. They are the premier screen printer of the Lehigh Valley with service to the whole country, professional and personable in a way that only a DIY business can be. They also have ridiculously low prices for whatever your screen printing needs may be. You can visit them online at xlvacx.com. That's xlvacx.com. Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. We also have the Essex Coffee Roasters. All their coffee is roasted to order. They have high quality beans, bunch of apparel, and tea available. They are bringing high quality coffee to the masses without the pretentiousness. Use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. You can visit them at www.essexcoffeeroasters.com. That's ESSEX, coffeeroasters.com. Once again, use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. This episode is also brought to you by Paramount Pictures. Paramount Pictures is a legendary producer and global distributor of filmed entertainment since 1912. Paramount Pictures' library consists of more than 1,000 film titles with rights to an additional 2,500, featuring films by Hollywood's most respected filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, J.J. Abrams, and Michael Bay, among others. Paramount Pictures' library consists of more than 1,000 films, including such classics as Star Trek, Godfather, and Indiana Jones franchises. Academy Award winners Braveheart, Forrest Gump, and Titanic, and current favorites such as the Mission Impossible and Transformers franchises. Paramount Pictures distributes its titles on DVD and Blu-ray through Paramount Home Entertainment. We are happy to have them. We fucking love Paramount Pictures.
Good evening. I'm Luce, and on dark and eerie nights like this, I can't help but think about Halloween. I'm so sick of Halloween celebrations being limited to a few weeks out of the year. That's why I created It's Always Halloween, a year-round podcast on which I'll dive deep into the dark history of our favorite horror-filled holiday. Each episode will explore one specific custom, fear, or fright, inspired by my own curiosity and listener queries. If you have a Halloween question you need answered or just want to share a Halloween memory, call my All Hallows hotline at 802-532-DEAD. Or you can write me an email at it'salwayshalloweenpodcast@gmail.com. Tune in if you dare.
This movie podcast actually discusses movies. Be aware that it may discuss any of the following elements: endings, surprise twists, unexpected cameos, and all manner of spoilers. If this doesn't appeal to you, why listen to a movie podcast? Without further ado, please enjoy our feature presentation, The Shameless Picture Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shameless Picture Show. I am your host, Michael Viers, and joining me today is a guest that I've been wanting to have on this show for a while, and this is the first time that it really just came together in a way that worked for everyone. Today I am joined by someone who describes himself as a professional dabbler, an analog enthusiast, and a proud girl dad, Chris Gruber. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2007 with degrees in film production and English. With over 20 years of experience, he is a passionate collector of physical media and an active member of the Midwest tape collecting community. Alongside a group of friends, Chris co-manages Catacombs Media and has been organizing an annual collecting event in Milwaukee for nearly a decade. His collecting interests span sex comedies, coming-of-age stories, obscure dramas, and rare documentaries that may not see release in any other formats. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. Doing pretty well. So,
I was thinking about it as I was reading this bio. I'm trying to remember where we met. Did we meet each other through Christina, or did we know each other a little bit before that?
I think through Christina. I think we went to go see. I think I ran into you. We were going to see Billy Club or something, if memory serves me, at the Drew Roja movie.
Yes,
at the film festival. So Christina and Bob were going, and I think my wife and I joined up in the group. So that's, I think, how we ended up getting introduced to one another.
And then we got to know each other a little bit better because of Catacombs, what do you call this? An organization? At the time, it was just an event.
Yeah, it's kind of evolved. So, I mean, really, the first event itself was more of like a tape swap. I think
that was the one I was at in the back. Yeah. It was in the back of a bar.
Yeah, it was in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That was the first one. That was almost 10 years ago now. Time flies, right?
Wow. So, fuck, that was 10 years ago. I still have those tapes.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it was kind of just a tape swap where we were kind of testing the waters because, I mean, we'll get into it, I'm sure, in a little while, but tape collecting and specifically VHS has really kind of changed. The landscape has changed quite a bit over the years. And when we ran that swap, it was more or less an opportunity for myself, my friend Eric, and a few other local collectors at the time to dump some of the items from our collections that we didn't necessarily want. So I think that it started out easy, right? We were just really seeing what existed. Nobody had really been and I don't want to say nobody. Obviously, tape collecting's been around for a long time, but 10 years ago in Milwaukee, and as you know, from recent years, VHS and pretty much anything that's vintage or analog, inclusive of like cassettes and vinyl records, has seen a huge surge, and along with that, kind of transformed our event and the popularity there too. So it did start out just amongst friends, just kind of dumping some of the tapes from our collection we no longer wanted. Some of the guys were getting out of tape collecting, so to speak, and I think Ben, one of our local buddies, was dumping things like, now hindsight, right? He had a 10-cent bin. So at the time, he was literally dumping copies of like Sleepaway Camp and Rad was in there for 10 cents, and nobody cared because 10 years ago value was still higher than that, right? But Sleepaway Camp was not $100 tape like it is now, which is just, in my mind, kind of ludicrous because obviously Sleepaway Camp's accessible. Yeah,
don't get me wrong, tapes So tape collecting in itself, there's a lot to it. It's not just something as simple as like, oh, it's Sleepaway Camp. Obviously condition always matters. The condition of the box, they make sure there's no mold, things like that. But then one thing that I remember me and you talking about back during that original Catacombs event is just which company put it out, because VHS for the long was kind of the Wild West in a lot of ways, and different companies would release different things, and some of them got a way smaller tape count than others. So like, it's crazy to like, it made sense that there are certain tapes, certain releases. Like I think I have a copy of a movie called Australian film called Mutant, that I think I looked it up one time back, like this was 10 years ago. That tape, they said in perfect condition would have been worth maybe $80, maybe. But it's crazy to me that very common tapes are now going for a lot of money, like good condition or not.
Oh, yeah.
And that just blows my mind because
and it's interesting because it's not limited to tapes, right? It's vinyl records, it's everything that's like an original pressing, so to speak. And if we talk about just movies and movie collecting, whether that's VHS or Betamax or CED or Laserdiscs or Blu-rays or DVDs, right? A lot of the movies that are common, for example, like Sleepaway Camp, those are readily available. Maybe Shout Factory or Scream Factory put that out initially, the Sleepaway Camp 1, 2, and 3. Some of those are out of print now. Maybe they're all out of print. I haven't kept up on it really.
I think 2 and 3 are definitely out of print from them.
Yeah, not 1 though. I think 1's still a cheap buy. But to that effect, it's like
$15 to $20, yeah.
Right. But why, right? Why is the tape so much more expensive than some of those Blu-rays, right? And it's interesting because I guess we got to let's take a step back and why I got into collecting, because it was really kind of out of necessity. And I've talked about this with friends at length and people in the community. It comes up like, why do we collect, right? And while I want to say, oh man, I really love the aesthetic of VHS, it takes me back to like the days of when I was a kid and all my parents had was, a VCR and a CRT TV, which is partially true, right? There's some nostalgia value there and it's endearing. But when I started collecting, it was when I was in college, and my friend Ryan at the time, he was like well aware that I was trying to watch movies that weren't necessarily accessible, right? I went to UWM. He worked at UWM as an adjunct professor at the time, I believe, or maybe a TA. I can't remember if memory serves me right, but either way, we became friends, and we were co-running. He really helmed it, but we were running Basement Cinema at the time in B91, which was a weekly screening of sorts where we would show things like Scum of the Earth or the Evil Knievel movies.
He actually recently sent me a bunch of the like digital copies of the programs you guys made because he saved all those.
It's pretty amazing, and it was a lot of fun. I know that was maybe a little bit before your time there, maybe towards the tail end, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a way for us, as you know, from having gone to school there, we were an experimental film school first and foremost, where narrative wasn't necessarily being done or encouraged to an extent because it wasn't, NYU or even, Chicago.
Yeah.
So, but Ryan was introducing me to movies, and at the time, if you remember things like, I know I dropped Scum of the Earth there. We also watched Herschel Gordon Lewis films, and at the time, while the Herschel Gordon Lewis trilogy was just coming out on DVD in the Blood Box, I think that was one of the first DVD releases. I picked that up from Best Buy many years ago. Something Weird Video was putting, a lot of their catalog. It was kind of at that time in the early 2000s, right? Like this would have been 2004, 2005, 2003, somewhere around there, where VHS was still the main mode of, watching these films, right? The method of watching these films, because DVD was taking over, but why would companies put these out on DVD when the cost was so much more, so much greater? So I think for me, it came out of necessity. I wanted to watch movies. Ryan was like, hey, let's go hunting around and see what we can find. I always find stuff when I'm going around. And I will tell you, this is a really fond memory of mine. It was after I started looking around, Ryan let me know, and I knew about the video stores. So the video stores were kind of transitioning, right? Some of them were going out of business. Some of them were transitioning from tape stock, like VHS, to DVD, right? And trying to stay relevant and up with the times, which is kind of the natural progression. And now, of course, that then moved into Blu-rays and so on and so forth. And now video stores are pretty much extinct. So at the time, Ryan found a tape store in Bayview going out that was called Video Attractions, and it was actually owned by some folks that I had known through my family back growing up. I was in Boy Scouts, and the dad and the mom were very much involved in the Boy Scouts.
This was in Bayview. I'm trying to think, where was this located?
It was right on KK. You know where Outpost is?
Yes.
Basically on the corner where Outpost is, across the street. So on the same side of the street as Outpost.
Yeah.
But across
was it
whatever the side street is there.
Really?
Yeah, there's a storefront there still. But that's where Video Attractions was. So
it had like corner windows, right?
Yep,
like,
exactly. That was Video Attractions.
I didn't know that was the name of it, but I remember that video store. It was always that and Buc-ee's, and then there was like
Buc-ee's is around the corner, yeah.
RSC Video right over by Target or whatever that place was called.
Yeah, and I cleared them out too. I mean, I started finding their tape stock all over the place. Same with, Buc-ee's held on to their tape stock for a long time. When they finally closed up, the owner had some tapes in storage and things. But Video Attractions, he was like, "Hey Chris, I just found Wizard of Speed and Time," and I'm like, at the time I didn't know it. Now that's a pretty common movie to find, and it's available on a couple different labels. I think Star Maker even put out a copy of it, which was like their mass produced EP version of the movie. So he was like, "Hey, I found Wizard of Speed and Time, and they're selling off their tape stock." So I quick ran down there and I bought everything I could, right? And I knew them, so they were cutting me deals. They were just like, "Yeah, fine. Like we're happy. We're going out of business. Let's get some movies." And So that's how it started for me, because I was really, I mean, at the time I couldn't afford DVDs. I mean, as you know from film school, if you're shooting on film, it's expensive. And whether you go through Kodak for the discount or you go and try and support local, and at the time was River West Film and Video, you know, you want to work with them. But at the same time, it's like you're really broke. And at least I was. And so I was like, I want to watch these movies. I know they're around. How do I find them? So that's kind of where it started for me. It was out of necessity, not necessarily that nostalgia that I was talking about earlier. And,
no, I get that completely. Because you are... So what I love about this story is you are just a film nerd first and foremost. And it was just this appetite to see as much as possible. And while I know for myself... I am very much a nerd when it comes to quality. Like I spend a lot of time and effort into like my home theater and things like that. But my personal rule is I want it to be the best quality available. So sometimes if that's VHS, well, you know, people will be surprised if you have a somewhat decent sound system. Some of those tapes have good audio, all things considered. And I'm the same way. I don't care what if there's something I want to see, I will, you know, if it's only available at 240p on YouTube, that's how I'm going to watch it. Because for me, seeing it is more important than having the best possible quality version. Like if it's out there and it's readily available, sure, I'd rather lean towards a Blu-ray or something like that. But that's not always available, especially for obscure stuff.
Right. Right, and that's it. And you know, do I collect Blu-rays? Sure. I had a subscription to Vinegar Syndrome and, you know, Severn for a while, and I still buy from them every chance I can. They've come up to one of our events and we've done screenings, you know, at X-Ray.
So you've probably worked with Matt then.
Yeah, Matt was up here for the X-Ray Arcade event.
Just had him on my last episode.
Yeah, he's great. I love the guy. He's been really, really awesome. I haven't talked to him as much as I've wanted to, but you know, he's always like, "Oh yeah, definitely use our films if you want. Just reach out to me." He gave me his you know, email address. But yeah, so it's been great, and to that effect, yeah, I do have like higher quality collecting habits too. Like some of the things, like the films that I want to own, right? So prime example, prior to I think like 2 years ago, I want to say, the movie Road to Selena, that had Mimsy Farmer in it, was only available on beta, like analog formats, right? So it didn't have a DVD, and there were bootlegs and stuff and rips of the VHS essentially. But then it was put out on Blu-ray, and it's a fantastic film. Now I have the magnetic video copy of Road to Selena. I also hunted down in Belgium a print of it, so I have a 16mm print of Road to Selena, and it's complete, cleaned up. But again, I like that film. If I want the film and I want to watch the film, I want to watch it in its, you know, best possible presentation, then yeah, I'll buy the format. I still have a lot of my original collection from back in the day, so to speak, as far as VHS goes. I have beta, I have laser discs and CEDs for decoration purposes these days, of course, for CEDs. But yeah, my collection's evolved over time, mostly because, especially when it comes to VHS, right? It's transformed. I originally collected out of necessity because I bought all these films, right? Like I bought all these films, and I'm like, yeah, I want to watch these. I want to learn from them. I want to be able to expose myself to these movies that I wouldn't otherwise see. But as they started coming out on Blu-ray or DVD and they had a higher quality available, I was more apt to sell or trade the tape copy off, knowing that there were collectors collecting for different reasons, right? Some people wanted just VHS for that aesthetic or nostalgia purpose or whatever reason they have, that's fine, right? For me, it was more like, I can now own this on Blu-ray. So now I can have this. I'm okay. But there are things like, for example, Road to Selena, where I have it on multiple formats because I love that film. I will have it in whatever presentation I want to watch it in. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess, the evolution and the reasons behind collecting. Everybody's got their reasons, right? For you, you know, you've got some that I'm sure you're like, I mean, for me, I have Back to the Future and Bloodsport on VHS because that's how I watched it as a kid. I still have the first the first VHS I ever bought at Suncoast when I was a kid, and that was Demolition Man. I still have it. I've watched it a bajillion times, right? So for me, it's like, yeah, I'll hang on to that stuff forever just because. But my collection grew to the point where it was, almost not able to be managed very easily, right? Moving was a chore. Moving to 2 different houses, almost an entire moving truck full of my collection. So, yeah.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And you touched on, everyone has their reasons for collecting.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely seems like yours have evolved over time. But like VHS, like physical media collecting in general can be intimidating, especially now. Like there's so many, like we live, I don't care what all the doom and gloom articles about the death of physical media have to say. We are in a new golden age in a lot of ways. Yeah, I can't go to Target or Best Buy and buy a movie like I used to be able to, but more stuff is getting put out in a higher quality format. Things that we never thought we'd probably ever see, more than ever. I think brick and mortar stores are dying, but a lot of these physical media stores, companies, they're doing well. But for me, I started collecting VHS out of like it was completely nostalgia. We were talking a little bit about video stores. Bucky's Super Video was like my haunt. It was I spent so much time there. If I could ever track down the owner, I would honestly just want to talk to him just to tell him that my love for cinema came from him. And like it was always my goal to try to, like, before they closed down, to get one of their big signs, but they're pretty much all gone. And it bums me out every time I drive past there that it was like just empty up until like a couple months ago. But for me, it was nostalgia. It was just, I wasn't going for rare tapes. I wasn't going for, it was just, this is a movie that I want to watch and I want to own it, and I don't own it in any other format, so fuck it. Let me buy it from some collectors, or like at the time during Catacombs, you couldn't get Fade to Black. So Eric sold it to me for a really good price, and I'm never going to get rid of that tape, even though I have that fancy new 4K that Vinegar Syndrome put out. So I just kind of buy what strikes my fancy. I also know that I'm not going to pay above a certain price because it doesn't matter to me in that way. But now with the way that tape collecting especially has gone, unless you're going to like half-price books and just finding whatever they have there, the second-hand market for tape collecting has gone insane in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it has.
Like, I went to Half Price Books and I found a collection of Hitchcock films, and I can't believe I actually only got them for $1, because I feel like that same collection from someone else on, through one of the tape collecting places would have been significantly more. And like, I have my things that I look for. Like, I kind of started a goal last year that my 2 favorite actors of all time are Vincent Price and Burt Reynolds. So like, I just want to own all of their movies. There's a lot of them. I don't care the format. I just want to own one of everything that they made. So like, I have my things I look out for, but I also know I'm not going to go spend $50 on a tape, because that doesn't matter to me. So what have you noticed? You started as you started with Ryan collecting tapes as a way for you to see cinema, and then eventually you started buying out stores because the opportunity presents itself. And
yeah.
You didn't want those, I assume, if you don't mind me speaking for you for a sec, I assume you just didn't want to see those tapes get thrown in a dumpster. What have you noticed? It kind of seems like you became almost accidentally one of like Milwaukee's notorious tape traders, and it was just because you wanted to get stuff just to see it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the landscape's been changing specifically with tape collecting. I mean, that's the analog format that I've been most closely attached to this whole time, right? And whether I started out collecting for, out of necessity or not, it's changed, right? And people enter for various reasons. Some people find out, like, for example, some of the people that came to that swap, by the way, that won 10 years ago, prime example, some of those guys never knew what a VHS was. They were young enough that it was after they just stumbled upon it. And so I see that, right? You see younger people that didn't grow up when VHS were a thing, where, they're still taking interest in it. And so I think if we track this a little bit, right, you had the time where video stores were transitioning their stock from VHS to DVDs. So there was that transformation where people like myself were buying up stock because they wanted to have a movie collection, build one, and it was the cheapest possible way was to buy the tapes, right? Once that transition completed, you had video stores now that had DVDs, really, mostly DVDs. When video stores started closing down, right, and we're talking 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that real trail off where things like Planet Video, Hollywood Video, the big chains, Blockbuster, when that trail off really happened, they were selling their entire stock of DVDs too. And so the landscape changed again. And for a period of time, because VHS was not stocked in these stores, most people forgot about it. So the way that I know that happened, right, is because I got involved. I was like still collecting movies, still collecting tapes, and I got involved in the Facebook groups, right? And I won't, drop a bunch of names to the groups or whatever in here, but the groups helped me kind of learn about stuff that I didn't know about, helped me show off some of the things that I did have that other people didn't know about, and that's where my integration in the community that kind of existed already, right? It's been around for a long time. Some of these groups have been around for like 12 years, and I think I joined them maybe, I don't know, right around, well, before that first event for sure, so at least 10 years ago now. But yeah, I mean, there was still like this underbelly of a culture, if you will. It wasn't huge. It was thousands of people, but when you're talking about throughout the world, right, there's international collectors on some of those groups too, and that's not very many people, right? But now, when you can go to Walmart and you find a copy of Terrifier on VHS as part of their thing, or you go to Spirit Halloween and they've got sticker packages that are based on Killer Clowns from Outer Space or Halloween 2, that's how you know it's big again. And so it kind of ebbed and flowed, right? You had that surge when the video stores were kind of dumping stock and transitioning to DVD. Then you had a lull there where it was really just people that either had built a collection or were still buying up tapes. And then it kind of surged again. So what we're talking about here, and where I think what happened for me and what happened for my friends, right? And I'll talk about Eric. You mentioned Eric earlier. So Eric and I are good buds, like really good buds. And I met Eric on one of the Facebook groups years ago. I had posted that I went West Allis over by where I worked at the time. There was a little mom and pop shop. It wasn't a video store. It was just a resale shop, like a little thrift. And it was pretty dirty. And I went in there and they had some tapes. And in there it was like 10 for $1. And I found like Video Dead and a bunch of cool stuff. And now that tape is very expensive. That's how it goes. But for me, yeah, I got addicted kind of to buying up tapes. And part of it was, to your point, like not wanting to see those get thrown out, right? I didn't want to see those get thrown out because who would know when a company like Shout Factory or Scream Factory or Vinegar Syndrome or whoever is going to put that out. And until that happens, those copies are just getting thrown away, right? They're just disappearing, or they're at least in the hands of some collectors. So for me, what happened was during that lull, and with friends like Eric and my friend Michael, that, Catacombs, we're all attached to Catacombs there. We were hunting, right? We were looking for tapes, not just for, we don't want to destroy these. Of course, we wanted to like sell some of them to pay for our gas money and food and stuff like that. But we were also looking to fill in, like, if I can go and buy out this store or go pick in this store and find some stuff to fill in holes in my collection without having to spend any money, awesome, right? That's what we were after. So it didn't happen all the time, right? I mean, how many copies of Spookies do we need in our collection? I mean, I would argue none, but some people love that movie, and they're like, I need all of the variations of the VHS. There's international copies. I do have a couple copies of it, but point is, like, we were able to say, okay, we don't need Spookies. Let's go sell Spookies. We know it's highly sought after, so that'll help pay for gas and food and fun. It was more about just hanging out with friends, right, and filling in gaps in our collection. We shared. So, like, Eric was excellent at hunting, right? He and I would regularly get together on the weekends during that lull, and now I'm talking after the video stores closed, but before this VHS craze that happened, I think, shortly before the COVID pandemic happened. I think that was really, really where it surged, if I had to put a finger on it. But and as it did with vinyl and things like that, other analog formats. But Eric and I would go hunting, right? And we would find tons of stuff because there were people that were just like, yeah, I used to own a video store and I have all this stock. No joke, and I'll tell you this, and if Eric's out there and he ends up listening to this or whatever, he called me up one weekend and we would regularly go to the thrift stores. We would go do a huge loop and we'd go hunting for tapes in like rummage sales, estate sales. We'd look on Craigslist, everywhere. We'd go out pretty far. I didn't go nearly as far as him and Mike in some cases as far as distance goes, but there was one time in particular that was amazing because at the time he was living over in, I believe what would have been Bayview there, right on the cusp. Mm-hmm. And no joke, a block behind him, the block over, was a rummage sale. And we're like, yeah, okay, there's not going to be anything there. So what do we find? We found a box. And on it, it said the whole HOLE box for $20. And right on top was a copy of Zombie Lake on Wizard Video, the big box, and Stunt Rock on, I think that's Monterey, right? And so we were like, okay, this guy's got some stuff. We didn't even see it until we were on our way out because it was, in the like one of those plastic crates, right? And so we were like, holy cow. Picked it up. It was a lot of beta, but who cares, right? So I Spit on Your Grave was in there on Wizard, Mutilator, Unrated, all sorts of really cool stuff. And it was a block away from him, And so it's like, you never know what you're going to find out there. But during that lull, I think, is where the back to your original point of how did you get to being one of like the quote unquote people in Milwaukee that is like, seen as one of the main tape collectors or whatever. Back to that point, that's where it started happening was like, okay, we were out hunting actively and during the lull where it wasn't popular because what ended up happening, we were able to buy up a bunch of stuff. That guy ended up having like, we went back and we were like, hey, do you have any more tapes? And he let us upstairs in his house. And I think we pulled like 700 tapes that day. So in a matter, and it was a block away. So we were literally just carrying it over, loading it into Eric's vehicle, driving it over, and so we built stock, and it was more along the lines of like, okay, we have all these tapes. We've continued to go hunting because it's fun. We're hanging out. We're doing our normal thing. And if we find tapes, great. If we don't, cool. We ate some crappy food and we had fun, over the course of that lull, and by lull, I mean between when the video stores started going out and when the surge happened, we were able to actually find stuff in bulk, right? So we'd find video stores, we'd find promos, we'd find, theatrical one sheets, posters, standees, we'd find tapes, all sorts of stuff related to tape collecting. And then the surge hit. And so we amassed a lot of that inventory, if you will, or just stockpile of tapes during the lull. And then the surge happened in popularity where everyone started, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people came out of the woodwork. They started discovering tape collecting. They're like, oh, this is a cool hobby. Let me get into it. And when that happened, then it became more and more difficult for us to find, every now and then we'd find a gem. Eric was really like the bloodhound of the group. He'd find everything. Well, and
then I just remember, around the time it was after I met you, but it was around the time that you did the first Catacombs event, or one of the first. I think I was at the first one, but I don't remember for sure.
You were. Yes, you were.
Okay, so that was the first one, yes.
Yep.
And I remember I won a raffle that day, and I still have those tapes.
Oh, you won the raffle, hey?
I did win the
raffle.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I remember it was around that time. It was like I feel like it was like almost right after that things started changing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, so I remember like when we met each other around that time, I still just collect casually because I like the format. I'm not a hardcore collector, and I remember you asking me, it's like, oh, where do you get your tapes from? And I was like, well, you just find them out in the wild. And since I wasn't looking for any like primo titles or anything, I was just kind of buying up what interested me, or honestly what just had fun cover art. I think I told you, she's like, oh yeah, I think I just bought a couple of tapes at half-price books, and you just kind of laughed and like, yeah, you're not going to find anything super great at half-price books because I clean it out all the time. But and I remember you inviting me to one of your trips. I wasn't able to make it, but I remember you inviting me to potentially go along with you to hunt, just because you saw that I had an interest. But one thing I appreciated about that little group that you had at Catacombs is I never felt like the people at that group were like talking down to the new collectors. Because like I've met with some people over the last couple of years who are collectors, and I just feel like I'm being talked down to if I'm not willing to pay $200 for a foreign tape or something. Like,
sure.
Because that's not why I got into this. I just got into it for the fun of it. And the thing I always appreciate about you is, you've always been very fair with your pricing when you do sell tapes. And I just feel like you just want things to go to people that are going to appreciate it. And even though you do a lot with, tape trading and selling, and I don't know if you still do, but I feel like at one point Catacombs might have had a website or something.
We did, yeah. We still do. It's just been pulled down, yeah.
But I feel like you were doing this because you legitimately liked it. It wasn't a business for you. You weren't trying to gouge. And I always appreciate it. I don't really know what my point is. I guess I'm just complimenting you.
No, I appreciate it. And you're not wrong. You hit on a couple of really good points there. First off, gatekeeping, right? That's a huge thing in fairness, it's not exclusive to VHS collecting. It's video games, it's comics, it's just cards.
Horror in general.
Yeah, horror in general is like huge, and I mean, gatekeeping is everywhere. In every hobby, it's going to happen. Have I engaged in gatekeeping to some extent? Yeah, sure. I'm sure I have.
I have too.
Everybody has. But the thing for me is, I love collecting movies, right? I love talking about movies. I love talking to people. My voice is raw right now because I like teaching people. That's my day job, right? And that'll never stop. And for me, it's like, what I've gotten out of the tape community, the friendships, have been far more valuable than like the tapes themselves. And I think that if I was in it to make money, I'd have a bad time. I mean, I've seen people in the community come and go, that they open up shop, so to speak, whether it's brick and mortar. I mean, we've had a few in Milwaukee that open and close, and their approach is, I see this as a cash grab, right? And that's fine. That's fine for them. They don't integrate well with the collecting community, and I think that's a natural progression for them, because they tend to be, they're not interested. Like, to your point, if you come to Catacombs, if you come to one of the events, and you're interested in tape collecting, I'm not going to be a dick to you. Like, I want you there. Mm-hmm. I want you to learn. I want you to engage and keep it going, right? But if you're there because you're like digging through bins and you're really just scanning your phone and looking at eBay to see what you can make some bucks off of, that tends to be off-putting. And that's where, at least for me, that's where I tend to gatekeep, or I'm like, get out of here, okay? Or I'm limiting your purchases because, we try, Catacombs in general tries to price things very appropriately to get them into the hands of collectors, and we've been taken advantage of. That's happened a few times, and it comes with the territory. But, it's more about the community than anything else, and that's not just Milwaukee, right? I go, Mike and Eric and I, we go to plenty of events. This last April, we go every year pretty much to Cinema Wasteland in Ohio, and we meet up with
never been there. I've always wanted to go.
Huge group of tape collectors. I mean, I don't know how many there were this year. There's a big group photo of us, and every year when people can make it out, because people come from all over, right? People are coming from the East Coast, West Coast, all over to meet up for Cinema Wasteland, and that's one of them. Obviously, there's an actual VHS Fest that's out at the Mahoning Drive-In in Pennsylvania. That's huge. I've not gone there myself. I had plans to go this year. That, of course, changed, but next year it's on my radar. So that's huge. That's an actual dedicated VHS festival, whereas we just hang out at Cinema Wasteland because it happens to be in the Midwest and it's kind of middle ground for everybody, and it's also a horror convention that's small. But it's more about the community. It's more about getting people interested, keeping the collecting community alive. Now, it has transformed, and you kind of started talking about it a little bit there. So I'm not super stoked with the way it's gone. There's not much I can do about it. So it's just like anything, right? Change management. We either adapt or we have a bad time. But just like, and I'll just get into it right away. Grading cards, grading comics, grading vinyl. That hit this past year. There's a bunch of outfits that are ultimately, I mean, if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, they're scam artists because they're starting up their own fake grading system with the intent to just profit off of, grading and whatever. They don't have any knowledge. They end up hiring people from the collecting community that are willing to kind of sell their soul, so to speak, to kind of fuel their business. But they've also closed down or been run out for one reason or another because they don't mesh well. Again, they don't integrate because they're in it for the wrong reasons. And the landscape's changed in the last 2 years again. I don't know if you were around or paying attention, but we had a sealed VHS for grading purposes craze about 3 years ago now during the pandemic, where literally if it was a sealed VHS, like I'll just openly talk about it, and I'm fine doing that. But for example, I had a copy of Star Trek, the motion picture, the original release, sealed with the Paramount stamps, like the watermarks on it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about this tape, whatever. I got it for $20 at one point or something ridiculously low. I sold it for $1,000. And that's because people were getting into the grading aspect of it, right? So
it was around this time. I remember that because I remember you candidly reached out to me.
Oh yeah,
and said, "Hey, I know." Yeah, he's like, "I know you're." He's like, you pretty much said, "I know you're not a collector in the same way that I am, but do you have any sealed tapes?" And I was like, "I have."
Spinal
Tap.
Is it?
This is Spinal Tap, and you're like, "I think I could flip it," and it didn't end up happening. Because I think the guy who was going to buy it flaked out. But it's like, I don't give a shit about this tape.
Yeah, he actually died.
Like, if I can make a couple bucks off, like, I'm not trying to, like, make money off these tapes. But if I can, without doing much effort, and I can just give you a cut, fuck yeah, I would have done it. And that kind of just went, like, I don't want to say it went away, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's as prevalent. I feel like I remember when the grading thing started happening, because like I lurk in a lot of those VHS groups. I don't feel like I'm on the, like, I don't have anything worthwhile, and so usually I just kind of follow along and try to learn stuff. But like I don't usually have much to say, so I just lurk. And I remember it was a big hot button issue for a while, and it still pops up, but not in the way that it did. It's kind of interesting how quickly that's died out. The VHS collectors, like the real ones, just really pushed back.
They did, and that just happened recently. There was an outfit called IGS, Investment Grading Services or something, and it was a startup a couple years ago, and they were trying to make themselves relevant. What was scummy about it was while they were starting up their grading services, they were also buying up all of the sealed tapes on eBay and Amazon and all these outfits, right, for cheap. And then they were boosting the prices and selling them for high. Whatever. Cash grab. It happens in every industry, whether it's collecting or not. In actual business, it's like, that's occurring. But yeah, I mean, it was a flash in the pan, thankfully. I think we're moving past it now, where I think grading definitely has its place for like baseball cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon cards or whatever that, that is.
Comics.
I think people are finding, though, that it doesn't really resonate as well. It was a flash in the pan. Prices have steadily been declining. If you look at trending on eBay, which is a pretty good indicator because they're selling on heritage auctions, they're selling on eBay and things like that as far as the graded tapes go. And they're all trending downward for the most part. So that's a good indicator, at least for people like me, where we're like, hey, we're not in this for grading. I think that's silly. And I would never do that myself. But at the same time, if you exist, like, I don't mind selling you a tape that I know you're going to try and do whatever you're going to do with it. So everybody's got their piece, right? I'm not absolving myself of questionable or ethical behavior, questionable ethics here. Wow, tongue-tied. But yeah, I mean, I'm not absolving myself of that. I definitely sold some tapes and things. I try not to your point, take advantage of people, though. I use that, I try to approach that when it does become available. But yeah, it's trending downward. I think we're on the mend. The tape communities fought them off, so to speak, as you kind of mentioned. It was really like, whether you engage with the behavior or not, they basically trolled IGS and a couple other outfits out of existence, or to the point where they were like, we're closed for the foreseeable future, which hopefully translates to we're done now. But if they end up coming back, so be it. We've got ways around it too. So
yeah, and it's also funny too. Like you had talked about finding like some secondhand shop in West Dallas one point when you bought tapes, and I live in West Dallas. There's a lot of antique and secondhand shops in West Dallas for whatever reason, and it's funny how even like I was gonna say price gouging for VHS has even hit places like that. Like I was just kind of walking through a vintage shop in West Dallas, and I saw a copy of Joe Dante's Hollywood Boulevard on VHS, and he wanted $25 for it. I was like, really? $25? And it was not like it was like a perfect condition copy. It's just it was sitting on a shelf somewhere, and I was like, oh, it's not even just in the collecting community. It's just anyone who sees it now as a commodity. But with the way that things are trending, and with Catacombs in general, what do you kind of see your role as in the world of collecting? Not even just VHS, but just film culture. Like, what do you want? What are you trying to get out of this at this point? Like, what do you want to see happen?
What do I want to see happen? I mean, I think if I had... I mean, what I want to happen is already kind of happening, right? I joined up with other tape collectors like Eric and Mike, and they're some of my best friends now. I have other friends that live elsewhere in the country that I've met through tape collecting. So for me, it's about making that connection and finding things in common with people, and that's happened on a personal level for me. I've also been able to hone in on tapes that I wanted for my collection, and I think I mentioned it to you or I showed it to you, but I had found the complete Storylords television show.
Yes, yeah. I'm so jealous of that. I thought I dreamed that show. I truly did.
Oh, no, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
I really thought I dreamed that up until, I want to say it was like probably around the time that you found it. It had just kind of started popping up because of the way that the internet works, and just people finding clips of it. I was like, oh no, I didn't make this up. This exists. And then you found that. Was that like would you say that was like a grail item in your collection, or was it something you didn't even know you wanted it till it came up?
I've wanted it for a very long time. So when I was a kid, I went to school in St. Francis, Wisconsin, and specifically Deer Creek Elementary, which is over by the lake, just south of Bayview there. And they used Storylords tapes. They got them from the library, and they'd pull the AV card in, and they'd put Storylords on. And I remembered that show as a kid because I was like, oh my God, the characters here are great. This is ridiculous. Why are we watching this? It's like complete fantasy and not even learning, even though at the time, that's how it felt at the time. Of course, now you look back on it, it's got a structured curricula built into it, lessons, things like that. But I've wanted it for a very long time. I used to work at a company downtown that a lot of us go, and I know that your viewer base, or your listener base rather, is probably local too. So anybody that knows Captel, I used to work there as a supervisor for a while, and I found one tape at the downtown library one time for sale, and I got it home, and it was just it was so beaten that I couldn't even get it to function. I swapped shells. I tried repairing it. It just didn't happen. So yeah, I'd been on it. I've been on the hunt for that for years. And then out of nowhere, as luck would have it, it popped up on eBay. And I won't say how much I paid because I paid quite a bit for it. But it was worth it for me because I'd been after it. And that's the only way to really get it outside of, you could see it on PBS and on YouTube. But for me, I wanted to own that.
So what was that? Were those broadcast tapes or those?
These were VHS. So to your point, it was a broadcast. It was put out on PBS, I think, through Stevens Point is where it was filmed. And they have a museum now for Storylords. It's Storylords Museum.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool. But Yeah, so originally they were broadcast tapes, obviously because of the television programming, but they also put out, I think, a small run. I don't know if it was on a label or, like a distributor, like what distributor it was itself. I could probably find that out really quick by opening the tapes behind me, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, it was these are normal VHS. They're just in clamshells and they're library cases, right? So it's like you would find them at your public library in one of those plastic cases with a cut box, so to speak. But these are just inserts.
It's stories like this that just bring me so much joy, and the reason I love talking about film culture so much. Like the fact that we live in a world where there are still film prints being found in dumpsters for like lost movies blows my mind. And I have a friend, I'm not going to out him because he's bootlegging stuff, but I have a friend who's he's got this whole concept where me and him share a mutual love for The Adventures of Pete and Pete. And that show, the first 2 seasons got like a so-so DVD release, and the third one was completely scrapped. Like they printed the discs, but it never got released. So he's been on a hunt. He's like, someone somewhere has to have a copy of this. It's probably like there had to have been one floating around, or someone sold a box or something. And he has this whole thing where he is trying to restore The Adventures of Pete and Pete using combination of like AI technology and a couple other things to make it look as best as he can. And he's using a mixture of sources. Like I think a couple of years ago, Noggin had played the entire show again, and it was slightly better than the VHSs that had come out, combining that with the DVDs. And like he told me recently that he just got he has a lead on the elusive 3rd season broadcast tapes. So I love that stuff like that is still out there. And that's what honestly excites me about collecting. Yeah, I love having to me it's like having a library of films to pull from, just because like if someone wants to be able to see something, I like knowing that I have a higher probability of other people than having it, even though my collection is not even that big. But how has your collecting changed? Because at first you were just buying up everything and anything, and probably selling duplicates or whatnot. But you're probably at a point. I've never seen your collection, but you're probably have a point where you have a copy of some sort for probably most movies you'd want to see. How do you keep collecting interesting when you have so many?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yes, my tape collecting has changed quite a bit, and at one point I had several thousand tapes in my collection, which became, as I mentioned earlier, pretty hard to deal with when you're moving or reorganizing or things like that. And over time I've become much more lax in terms of letting things go, especially there was a point maybe 4 or 5 years ago where stuff was coming out on Blu-ray. I think my friend Adam or Grizz from the tape groups, he traded me the Blu-rays for from Shout Factory or Scream Factory for Sleepaway Camp 1, 2, and 3, and I traded him the tape copies. It worked out for him. He wanted the tapes, I wanted the Blu-rays, because guess what? Blu-rays are lighter and they look better. Obviously everybody collects for their own reasons, but so I mean, I started paring down. I think I can tell you personally, I think I've purchased maybe 10 to 15 tapes in the last year or two, because I have, to your point, I have most of the stuff that I'd want. And at this point, I'm still paring down, right? As DVDs or as Blu-rays come out from the boutiques, if I have a tape, I'm not opposed to helping collectors, especially ones that I know want it, get it into their collections, right? So I've been paring down. My collecting habits have kind of shifted, whereas when I was collecting early on, right, it wasn't uncommon for me to have just a random swatch of tapes that I found. So for me, it was like you go to Goodwill, and I know you mentioned Goodwill and pricing and stuff like that, but I'd go to Goodwill, and I literally in one haul, around the time I was with Ryan collecting, I would get Final Sanction and Surf 2 and Wacko, and no joke, that was one haul in Cherry Hill High. Those were 4 of the tapes there. But that doesn't happen anymore, right?
No.
So for me, my collecting...
not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. And some of those are pricier tapes these days. But it's like I didn't, at the time, I was grabbing what I could. I didn't have focus. It was like, oh, I've never seen Wacko by Graydon Clark. Now I love Graydon Clark. He's one of my favorite directors. I love his work.
Yeah, he's great.
Without Warning, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like it didn't have focus at first because I was collecting out of necessity. But now I've been able to pare down. And I know that at the beginning you shared my bio. Most of my collecting habits are focused on sex comedies, especially. I think I collect mostly sex comedies specifically now because a lot of them are not, they aren't appropriate for the times we live in, and they're less likely to be released, I think, in some capacity because of that, especially since, and rightfully so, we're now more culturally aware, and, we're sympathetic to a lot more things in life now, as we should be, but it just also means that some of those are going to get lost in the shuffle. So sex comedies, primary focus of mine, one of them. Same with obscure dramas. I have a few of them right in front of me, actually, that I purchased this last year. Two of them are, one of them is the film Abuse by Arthur J. Bresson Jr., which is a very controversial movie, and I don't think that is out on any other format. And same with This Special Friendship from 1965, maybe 1963. It was a French release, based on a novel from 1945, but they're very controversial movies, subject matter wise, and I don't think that there's a huge demand to see those. Right? There's not a subculture around like these two films as there is for things like shot on video, low budget horror from the 80s and early 90s, where everybody wants that stuff. And so
horror is definitely the backbone of tape trading, I think, to the point where probably people forget that you can get non-horror movies on tape. And I've always been a diehard horror fan, obviously, but it's those like weird pockets of other films that have also been intriguing me. Like there's an episode that never ended up happening for this podcast, but me and my buddy Jay, we were going to do an episode comparing The Last American Virgin and Lemon Popsicle. And the only way we could see Lemon Popsicle was from a VHS rip that he found online. And then to find out the movie had 7 sequels. I was like, if these ever got a release, they're never on VHS. That's probably it. I don't see the Lemon Popsicle sequels getting much love, like say something like the Bad News Bears did. And it's definitely my tape collecting is like a lot of it's just like I said, films I don't have in another format, and just weird things that I don't know how else I'm gonna see. I don't have a list. I don't have I'm honestly just hunting with my heart half of the time. But I think that's some of the most interesting stuff. Like you said, sex comedies that are going to be hard to find because they don't adhere to certain standards, and that's fine because that's when they were made. But there was a documentary about VHS that was put out years ago. I think it was 2013. It was called Rewind This. It was during that span of a couple of years where there's a fuck ton of VHS documentaries coming out. And there's a line from this documentary that's always really resonated with me, where there's at the end, and they're talking to like an archivist of film and television, and she was talking about VHS collecting, and she said there is going to be a mass exodus within the next 10 to 20 years of films that are just going to be gone to the world because the only way to see them is VHS.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I mean, you mentioned Lemon Popsicle, right? The Lemon Popsicle series, and I have a bunch of them. So, that's correct. You're not going, The Last American Virgin is one that was more accessible, right? It was more mainstream, but you're talking about Lemon Popsicle series where you have like on tape that's Hot Bubblegum and Up Your Anchor and Young Love, and I have a bunch of those behind me.
God, I'd love to see those.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so I collect that kind of stuff because, to your point, like, that stuff, and that quote you just shared, I mean, that stuff's going to be lost in another 10 to 20 years if people don't preserve film. And that's always been an interest to me. I know it's been an interest of my friends. One of my friends, shout out to Shiraz Bathina, a good friend from film school. He's in the archive at UWM preserving film and things. That's what his job is, and he loves it. And I applaud him for it because he's doing things to preserve, historical documents, right? Yeah. And just like that, it translates to, cinema and film. Vinegar syndrome is a label, right? But it's also something that is plaguing film preservation and something that needs to be dealt with. And VHS, the tape stock, when it came out, they had a pretty good idea of how long magnetic tape stock would last. And we're kind of approaching the limit of that, if it's been around, like magnetic video has been around for a long time and it deteriorates, right? Even if you're storing it in proper conditions, it's not molding. Sometimes tapes sag depending on how you're storing it. If you lay it flat versus standing it up, there's all different variety, all different things that can go in there. And I do think, even moving beyond like sex comedies and from a content perspective, you're talking about as a format, it's really important to preserve these because, a lot of these movies, whether it's because of the content itself or just there's no interest in it, right? Like 10 people maybe saw this movie and nobody cares. So in another 10, 20 years, what's going to happen? Those things fade away into the background and we forget about them.
Do you know of anyone who is trying to catalog these things?
Yeah. I mean, we all kind of are, right? So that's, cataloging VHS is something that I think some of us want to do, right? Some of us are completionists. So let's talk about completionism in the realm of tape collecting. So there's some people that collect distributors that they're like, hey, I want to look into all the movies that this distributor released. I don't care what it is. I want to find a document of it. I want to go through the catalog because they're all numbered, right? The releases are numbered. Like Canon Films, for example, or whatever, they had a video catalog, and there are numbers missing from there. So a lot of people are trying to piece that together. There's not, sometimes some of these guys, shout out to Chad, my buddy Chad, he's like buying things or coming into things like the actual catalogs that these distributors had, and he's using that to kind of do research, and there's people out there like Chad that are doing that. I myself did at one point look for certain labels. Now, would I go in and be like, oh yeah, let me collect every Vestron created? I mean, that would be like a lot of tapes, right? There are a couple people out there that collect certain distributors because they want to fill out that distributor. They love it so much, Lightning Video, Vestron, whatever it ends up being, which is also kind of, every now and then, that's where you find a nugget, right? So if somebody finds a tape that we didn't know previously existed, that's how they were finding it. They're like, oh, hey, I have this troll car video or whatever that we didn't know existed. And they're like, wow, that's awesome. And then that collector, sometimes will be like, hey, my buddy collects that label. If you don't really want it, let's get it to him, and stuff like that. And so in that way, there's not a Beckett of sorts. I hope there's never a Beckett of sorts in terms of, a complete catalog with associated pricing, because that would just be making more of a business out of VHS than it really deserves. But it would be nice to have a comprehensive list at some point. Is that going to happen? I don't think anybody out there is actually trying to say, hey, we have every known copy of a film, out there, because you have things like, Vestron and Star Maker, and then you have, offshoot labels and subsidiaries and stuff. And then you get into international releases where, it might be on Vestron in the United States, but then on a different label in, Germany, for example. So it becomes very hard. And VHS existed for a long time, right? So there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tapes, and we're still just trying to wrap our noggins around some of the stuff that's out there that we don't even know exists. Sometimes people find a tape. I think last week somebody found a tape on one of the groups, and we were like, and literally, even no matter how long you've been collecting, we were like, wow, we've never seen that before. So it happens. And I think because of that reason, there's at least for people like me and other collectors, I think that's why we stay around sometimes on social media, because we find these nuggets or we learn about things every now and then. But there's no catalog, not a comprehensive catalog. I think that would be too much.
What about preservation? Do you know any? Because like VHS has a shelf life. Do you know anyone who's trying to preserve some of these more obscure titles or trying to digitize them? Like, I can speak for myself, not necessarily VHS, but very recently, so in the world of discs, everyone out there listening is probably familiar with the concept of disc rot. Disc rot is very rare. It does not happen very often. However, within the last couple of years, it has been found that Warner Brothers titles from the years of like 2004 through 2007, when they had a specific you're using a pressing plant in Mexico, their quality control sucked, and there's a lot of these discs from that time period that are getting disc rot, and for some of them, they had never been released on disc since. So I have a couple of those. I've been trying to rip them, so there's a version of them, and most specifically, the Stanley Kubrick movie Eyes Wide Shut. That movie's been released on multiple formats. However, when Kubrick shot that film, he specifically shot a lot of the darker scenes overexposed and then lowered them down when they were printing the film stock, because he wanted them to be extra grainy. The Blu-rays and the 4Ks all wipe that grain away, but the DVD I have is closest to his original intent of the film, and it's one of those Warner Brothers discs that is susceptible to disc rot. So I knew I wanted to preserve that so that way it was available. Do you know anyone doing something like that with VHS?
I mean, there are a lot of folks that will clean tapes from mold specifically, like if there's mold spores that have accumulated either while they've owned it or before they owned it and then they got it in the mail. I mean, there's plenty of us. Most tape collectors should be able to clean their own tapes to help preservation.
I have to still learn how to do it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's super easy. Lunchmeat VHS has a video guide out there. Josh Schaefer has a video guide out there. There's a bunch of them on YouTube.
I have it on the shelf.
Yeah, it's just you have a deck and you open it up and you position your cotton swabs in alcohol and put alcohol in the swabs and you run it past the tape as it plays through the deck. There's other things out there too. But yeah, I think what there's people out there that are doing things like that. They're cleaning tapes. They're helping make sure that they're preserved in that manner. When it comes to VHS, right? I mean, if we know that something's super limited, like let's look at like Ross from Saturn's Core. Okay, Ross runs Saturn's Core, which is a partner of Vinegar Syndrome. So he works a lot with shot on video, like stuff that had very few tapes available. Wave video, right? Wave. Yeah. Some of those were mail order that was mail order, right? So how many tapes did they really have, right, put out there? So people like Ross are digitizing it, right? Whether that's because they want to run a label and distribute it or not, it's still preservation in a sense, right? Because after a certain amount of time, whether we like to admit it or not, that tape is done for. So there's preservation kind of happening, whether it's directly or not, just through boutiques like Severin and boutiques like Vinegar Syndrome and the partner labels. And there's many other small offshoots doing their own thing, whether licensed or unlicensed, it doesn't matter. It's still happening. So if you want to do, you mentioned bootlegging earlier, there's a lot of people bootlegging, whether they source from an original VHS or not, or they're downloading and ripping off YouTube to appeal to the masses. It's neither here nor there. The people that are sourcing it, like Ross, and they're running a distributor and working with, the owners of Wave and wherever else he sources from. I mean, that's preservation. It's just not direct preservation. It's preservation through distribution. And, at some point, those tapes in his collection or the very few copies that exist of any of those Wave productions, those are going to hopefully not rot into oblivion, but at some point they will, whether that's 10, 20, 50 years from now. It'll break down. and then we'll have that digitized copy. So I don't know anybody that's got like a warehouse where they're like, hey, I'm storing all these tapes and they're like climate controlled and locked down and we don't go in here. So what I'm referring to is like when you go to the archive at UWM, I had the pleasure of going in there. You go into a room that literally like depressurizes and temperature regulates before you go into the archive storage itself. So that's like an actual archive preservation, right? It's no messing around. It's temperature controlled to a point where like they balance the pressure in the room and the temperature. And I'm sure Shiraz or whoever else could explain that better, but it's no joke. So I don't know anybody that's taking it that seriously where they're like, hey, I've got this like panic room in my house and it's sealed off and it's a time capsule, in that regard. But that would be pretty cool, I guess. But yeah, I mean, people are doing it in their own way, right? Some people are digitizing it and storing it. Like for me, my grandfather passed away like quite a while ago now. And one of the things that I got when he passed were these old recorded tapes that he had. So he used to record things like Elvira Presents, like the weekends, right? So I have tapes recorded of like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and everything else with Milwaukee area commercials from the time, right? So I have stuff like that. For me, I've digitized those. I still kept the tapes, but I know that they're going to break down over time. They've already started to the point where some of the footage that I transferred over needed to be like helped along, and restored a little bit, which I'm fine doing in post-processing. But, it's stuff like that I think people are doing at an individual level where they're preserving more like commercials or like live broadcasts that were recorded or television that was recorded. As far as like commercial tapes go, I don't think that they're being preserved. Like you mentioned Kubrick, right? And that disc rot's a little bit different, right? Tapes like maybe The Shining, you find copies of that all the time, and it exists, and those are going to rot into oblivion eventually. But there are so many of them that I don't think it's going to matter. If you digitized it, would it be nice to have? Sure, but what I would ask, like, what value do you gain in digitizing something like The Shining on VHS versus ripping a copy of the DVD, right? At that point, you're talking about how Kubrick wanted the film represented, and it was more true to his reality. Yeah. And there is maybe color crushing is obviously the gamma space and all that stuff is different for VHS than it is in aspect ratio and stuff. But at that point, you're looking at probably not commercial films. I know that you use that as an example, but I don't think that's taking place. I don't think that's taking place for VHS. I think it's more along the lines of things like this is a super rare film where Ross is, digitizing for the sake of distributing and helping more people see the films. And then you've got, on the converse, people that are like out in the wild, so to speak, finding Mom and Dad's 1983 barbecue picnic. And they're like, hey, that's cool too. Let's rip that and digitize that so that's not lost, the stuff like that. So preservation, it takes on different shapes and shapes and sizes for people too. And I think with regards to tapes, I don't think we have like an actual archive, so to speak. But preservation's happening just in smaller pockets, more niche areas of it.
All right, so I've got one more question for you before I'll let you go for the night. So at the beginning of this interview, this discussion, whatever you want to call it, you told a really touching story between you and Ryan, and he kind of showed you the ropes of just not even necessarily tape collecting, just finding movies and just how to go about finding more obscure stuff. Say you were in Ryan's shoes right this moment, what would you tell young film fans who just want to either start collecting or want to find different cinema than what they're seeing? What kind of advice would you give them?
It's different. I would say, if you're looking for tapes specifically or just movies, you're talking tapes specifically or movies in general?
I meant kind of movies in general, but if you have a thought for both, I won't say no.
Sure. All right. Well, let's start with tapes because that's something that I still actively do, and I'm not opposed to sharing the trade secrets for myself or my buddies. Right? I mean, that just doesn't exist. One of the ways that I find new things, and it seems probably a little obsessive, but one of the things that I started finding new tapes through was just setting, obviously with the surge of VHS, this may not work in the same way that it did 5-10 years ago, but set up an eBay search, a saved search, and put in a couple key terms, right? Like just VHS and another word that you're interested in, right? Or maybe I'm looking for documentary and I just put in VHS and documentary, and start every day. I would for a while there, I would just look at the search results and I would start seeing stuff that I had never heard of before, right? And so you end up going down rabbit holes in that way. It works the same with eBay, with Amazon. If you type in VHS, or there's other sites like Camel and other places where, yeah, you can understand kind of like the pricing that's existed there. That's not really what we're after, right? But if you start searching for VHS, you start going down rabbit holes there too. And then you find somebody's storefront and you start going through all the tapes they have listed. And then you're like, what's this? I've never heard of this movie. What's that? So I think just exploring whatever niche it is or whatever format it is that you're after, if it's tapes, if it's beta, if it's laser discs, if it's CEDs, whatever, you have more tools. I think there are more tools available now and readily available now to kind of get your hands on stuff than there have been. I mean, Cinemageddon was instrumental back in the day for me, like torrenting, illegal, whatever. Cinemageddon was huge. There's sites out there right now that you can literally go to and just get a list of thousands and thousands of movies that you can download at your fingertips, or if you don't want to download them, fine, but you can also figure out the titles, and then you go down a rabbit hole and you're like, hey, this actor's also in this movie, or this director did this movie, and that's just how it starts. And that's where, at least for me and my approach kind of getting into things when I was younger, that's kind of how it happened, right? You just go down these rabbit holes and you start finding that you have a passion for it and you want to learn more. And that translates to film in general. I think, now I think the struggle is that we have almost too many resources available, whereas back in, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you still had mail order catalogs, you had, zines, you had things like that where it was publications or Usenet groups, or, early days of GeoCities and Tripod and Angel Fire and all that stuff. But now it's like there's so much that sometimes the information overload happens and you end up finding things for one reason or another that are uninteresting and you can get turned off. So it's, when you're looking at films, I mean, my recommendation would be, if you're looking at movies in general, find a few outfits, a few people that are running news sites that aren't, maybe I'm not going to say that, huge outfits aren't great. Like Bloody Disgusting back in the day, I learned plenty from them, and they cover a lot of stuff now. But for horror, like that's how some of the stuff I learned about, right, is not necessarily from Bloody Disgusting, but for some of the forums, right, people on the forums and stuff. So you get into the community surrounding some of those sites, and that's where you can really learn about cool stuff. Whether the site themselves, right, they have this audience. And that's another thing you can do, is maybe don't tap into the site itself. Maybe you're like, oh, yeah, you got to watch Skinamarink or whatever. But then you go to the forums and you're like, hey, I'm really passionate about this. Here's this thread that's popping off about people talking about, ghost movies that you've never heard of, or Polish films, or whatever it ends up being, and you can find your people. You can find things that interest you there. But I would say, if you're trying to pare down right now, if you're looking for movies, find a few of those sites, and I'm not advocating one way or the other for some of these sites, but, find one of them that works, find a few of them that work for you or that you're interested in, and don't just explore the site, explore the community surrounding those sites, because a lot of those bigger ones have a following, right, for one reason or another, and they're not necessarily affiliated with the site, but they're on their forums, they're, maybe going to events. Another way, honestly, connect with the community. I'm more than happy to talk, right? I'm sitting down with you right now. You've had me on your show, and I've been rambling at you for about an hour now, I think. Maybe longer, who knows? Time is meaningless and fluid. But, yeah, I think come out to an event. If you've got, if you live in Milwaukee, great. If we end up having something Catacombs-wise, you can go there. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. X-Ray does events. X-Ray Arcade in Cudahy, Wisconsin does events every year for Halloween. Severin does has done screenings there. If you live in, look at events going on in your area. It doesn't need to be tape collecting related, right? But movie related. maybe movie screenings. Start talking to people, groups of people at the screenings sometimes. Get connected to the community, because you're going to learn a lot more, I think, from finding those communities, whether it's around a news site or like a local event, than you will sometimes just kind of casting a giant net into, or a tiny net into a giant ocean, so to speak. So,
yeah. And community is what makes anything, any sort of art more interesting, but it's definitely what I get so much fulfillment out of when it comes to film and filmmaking, because I'm now kind of at a point where I still make films, but I've definitely become more known as a person who celebrates film culture and writes pieces about it and so on and so forth, and being able to communicate with people who like the same stuff, and sometimes even the people who don't like the same stuff. I've still had great conversations with someone who's hated shit that I've liked. So yeah, go support any local film screenings, and if you are interested in collecting, make sure to look up the next Catacombs event. Chris, when is the next Catacombs event? Do you know when it is yet?
Good question. Well, Eric moved out to Rhode Island a little while ago, and Mike and I actually were just I have to get back to him, but we're in the process of moving and I say moving the tapes. We have a storage facility with all of them. And we're moving units now shortly, and that is going to be a chore in and of itself. But a lot of the tapes are actually, local here by me, and we don't have anything on the books right now. We had been partnering with X-Ray. I haven't reached out to those guys. We kind of been getting our footing. I think there's a lot of change going on in our personal lives. This might be the first time that we don't do one, or if we do, it'll be much closer to Halloween. Those are things, though, too, because it's really low-key and low pressure. I mean, we would love to, and we're actually talking about doing something more formal with, like, screenings and directors and stuff like that in the future. But for now, it's, like, low-key. If we want to... In the past, my buddy Mike's had it at his house in Wauwatosa. And I'm like, cool. So we've done it in his backyard a couple times and had a huge turnout, right? You get 60, 100 people coming out to talk about tapes and buy tapes and trade tapes. That's cool. Then we go to like X-Ray Arcade and it's huge. So we're kind of getting our footing right now. I don't think we have anything on the books, but we're going to be relaunching the website. I know you mentioned that earlier. The website's down right now while we get a handle on our inventory and move things, and then we'll have it back up and running. And then we're also, we always do something every year, whether it's a small little get-together that's available to the public, or if it's more formal and at a venue. So we'll just got to coordinate that yet.
Cool. Well, once you know what it is, if there's anything I can do for the show, or what the show can do to help spread the word, just let me know. But Chris, I appreciate you hanging out with me for about an hour and change and just talking about tape collecting. Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity, Mike. And if you ever want to see some of those tapes that we talked about, like Lemon Popsicle, and if you want to sit down and watch Story Lords, if that tickles your fancy, I'm more than happy. I love that show. Hey, let's plan a movie night, and we can watch something weird. Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. Not a problem. And everyone, I appreciate everyone who tunes into this show for the last 8 years. I appreciate you all. And we have still some great episodes coming up later this season. And thanks for listening, guys. And then an extra special thanks to fellow podcaster and friend of the show, Austin Proctor, who actually had edited this episode. So if you want to support Austin Proctor and everything he does, be sure to check out the Frightmares podcast. I am a occasional co-host on that show, but he does one of my favorite podcasts about the horror genre, and it should be one of your favorite podcasts too. So thanks a lot for Austin Proctor for editing this episode.
The Shameless Picture Show is recorded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Easton, Maryland, and is hosted and produced by Nick Richards and Michael Viers. Today's episode was edited by Michael Viers. Our opening theme music was written especially for us by The Directionals, with narration by Zach McClain. The end credit music you're enjoying at the moment was generously provided by my friends in the band 10 Speed. The Shameless graphic design is masterfully done by Amanda Viers. An extra special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and to our generous sponsors. We are on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Google Play, and Libsyn. You can find links for all these amazing people in the description below.